What is up, everybody? Luke Film Boss here, and today I will be reviewing The Shift. The Shift is a modernized sci-fi slash fantasy retelling of the Book of Job from the Bible. Now, this movie's story doesn't run exactly parallel with the actual biblical story, but there are a lot of elements that are taken from that book of the Bible, and you can see it in the themes and the message of this film. From the technical standpoint, you can definitely tell this was a low-budget film, but they make the most of their budget, and I think that they did a pretty decent job of getting you to care for the characters. The main character's name is Kevin, and he falls in love with this Molly, which is surprisingly the second love interest in a movie named Molly that I've seen in like the last 2 months. So Kevin falls in love with Molly, and then his world falls apart, and he's taken to this alternate reality where the benefactor, they don't actually mention him as the devil, but he's definitely a conduit for what the devil is like in this movie. There are a few things in this movie that would suggest that the benefactor isn't the devil as in Lucifer, but he definitely represents the devil in the allegory of Job being told in this film. And the benefactor just makes for an excellent villain, being that he is modeled after the ultimate evil. He just makes for a really compelling villain. Probably the best villain I've seen in a faith-based Christian movie. He's definitely not my all-time favorite movie villain of all time, but there are some actually really good aspects here, so good job on that. The acting is compelling across the board here with the cast. This movie has a few of the cast members from the Chosen series, which I liked, and the actors that they got for Kevin and the benefactor work very well. And the only actor that I really know by name in this movie was Sean Astin, and he actually has a very interesting role to play. At first I thought he was just some generic, boring best friend or friend side character. He ended up being a lot more interesting and just more than that. The visual effects in this movie are actually pretty spot on as well. They're not amazing, and there's not a whole lot of visual effects in this movie, which I think has to do, once again, with the budget being a little restrained. But with what they had, I think they utilized it very well. They definitely saved a lot of the special effects for the end, and they look pretty believable. It's pretty solid. A lot of the visual effects have to do with when the characters shift from like different world to different world. And once again, they utilize what they had and make it look good. And there's actually some interesting sets. A lot of it has to do with tight spaces when it's like an action set piece, and then they have some just wide shots of like this giant lake. Different things that kind of make the film seem claustrophobic and then seem big at times. Very good use of camera work and different shots and different locations. All of that was solid. There's some interesting sequences, more so towards the end, but also some of it, I think, towards the beginning is some strong stuff. It doesn't rely on visual effects and stuff, but there's a lot of good editing and kind of this montage that's used for character building. I thought it was actually really good. I don't want to spoil too many elements, but there's actually some pretty good scenes. From a narrative perspective, I thought the movie was pretty good. It does use a lot of elements from the story of Job, and so it was able to lean heavy into that, but it also does what it needs to make it its own story. It definitely is not just the story of Job. There's elements in here that are copied, like when his friend is telling him he must have done something wrong, and that's why everything bad is happening to him, and the fact that, you know, he had a good life and then it was taken away from him. Those elements are in here, and it's used to further the overall message of a man staying faithful to God in the midst of all this pain and turmoil, in the midst of, you know, this very rough world that we live in, and him staying faithful and staying true to his values and being kind and trying to make the world a better place. It's a really good, strong message, and I think we need more movies like this that are going to take ideas and concepts from Bible stories and then make them different to the point where they can actually be used in a sci-fi, fantasy, maybe a romance, all sorts of different things that we can do with these stories. One big thing that I did have a problem with is we have the first act, and it's very well set up. I like the character introductions. I like how it flows and the pacing, everything. And then this movie commits one of the worst script writing fallacies, where it kind of just cuts off at the first act, and then we have a 5-year time jump, which makes you have to like restart all over. It kind of processes your brain. Basically have to reevaluate, relearn who Kevin is as a character. For me, watching the movie, it was like 5 years in the future. I'm just like trying to catch up with this monologue that Kevin gives about what's going on. And it's just kind of feels more like a chore. It feels more like trivia rather than a compelling story. And so it takes a little bit of time to gain that momentum back up. But once it does, the remaining second half of the second act and then the third act work very, very well. Just from a script, from a 3-act structure, that second act really suffers from the 5-year time gap. And it's not huge. I was able to still enjoy the movie, but it kind of took me out of the film for a little chunk of that second act. Because of how good the first act was, I was able to bear through some of the bad stuff, which then led to some really good stuff, and then it ended on some really, really good stuff in the finale. I'm just here to say I found it to be pretty interesting, pretty entertaining, intense, engaging. There's some fun stuff that they do with the concept of shifting. It's basically the Christian's multiverse movie, and it works pretty well. Purely, it's an allegory for the Book of Job that also takes place in a modern day actual world. It still takes place in our universe. There is still a God, there is still a devil, but it's told in a lens that's fantasized, it's symbolic, and that works very well. Overall, The Shift is a pretty interesting concept that takes a Bible story and then adapts it into a sci-fi fantasy. It's got some pretty good character moments, especially during the first act, that definitely make you invested in the characters, even if the second act kind of slows things down. But then it gets interesting again and ends off with this really, really compelling finale that was well worth the wait. Overall, I give The Shift an 85% in quality and 87% in enjoyment for an overall score of 86%. Thank you all for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help you be on the lookout for more videos from Luke Film Boss. Bye.